And good evening, I'm Sean Wilson. We are live in Tampa with a critical debate tonight between the two leading Republican candidates for governor of Florida. And they are competing for the seat that is being vacated by Governor Charlie Crist, as you know, who oddly enough would probably have been a shoo-in for a second term if he hadn't dropped out of the Republican Party. So let's meet our candidates tonight. Rick Scott, businessman from Naples, former chief executive of Hospital Corporation of America, who's never run for public office before, born in Bloomington, Illinois, and a Navy veteran. And Bill McCollum, Florida's Attorney General, and for 20 years a member of the United States Congress, born in Brooksville, Florida. He is also a Navy veteran. All right, welcome, gentlemen. We're glad to have you. Thank you for coming in here tonight.
Thank you, John.
Now, before we get started, let's go over the rules so everybody knows, which the candidates have agreed to. We have a studio audience, by the way, invited by the candidates, and we've asked them to remain quiet during the debate until the candidates have finished their closing statements, then they can do whatever they like. We will get to several topics tonight, and the candidates will have 90 seconds to respond. The opposing candidate will have 60 seconds for a rebuttal, and then if the other candidate feels the need to respond to that, he'll have 30 seconds to reply. Now, as for timekeeping, we are not using lights or bells or whistles. I'm going to help with that. We have some flexibility in our format, too, and I may be asking some follow-up questions at any time. So, I think we're ready to begin with our opening statements, which will be no longer than 1 minute, and the order was chosen by coin toss. Our first opening statement now is from Rick Scott. Mr. Scott?
I'd like to thank Fox and for each of you for watching. And I'd like to recognize my wife and my high school sweetheart, who I've been married to for 38 years, and for the rest of my family and her for their love and support. Our state is headed in the wrong direction. Record unemployment. Nearly half of our homeowners underwater on their mortgages. Our budget's in shambles. We need fresh ideas and someone with a proven track record. I'm not a politician. I'm a business person. I'm a conservative outsider. I'm the only candidate for governor that has built businesses, balanced budgets, cut costs, and build private sector jobs. I have a specific plan that will create 700,000 jobs. With accountability budgeting, we will cut government spending, we'll phase out the business tax, and we'll reduce property tax rates by 19%. I look forward to talking to you tonight about my plan to turn around Florida. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Scott, thank you. Now, Mr. McCollum, you have 1 minute.
Thank you very much, and thank you again, Fox, for tonight and for all of you who are watching. My wife and I, Ingrid, have been married 38 years. We have 3 sons, we have 2 grandsons, and we have another on the way. This election is about making Florida great again. We Floridians are hurting. We have over 1 million unemployed tonight. We need to create jobs, and I have a plan to do just that. Working with Steve Forbes, I proposed a plan that would create 500,000 new jobs over the next 6 years. This plan has no gimmicks, and I really am serious about this. When I'm governor, I'm going to be Florida's Chief Economic Development Officer. That's why I see this as so important. But the election is not just about policy. It's about leadership and character and honesty and integrity and records that we run on and records that we have in the past that you can judge us by. And I will tell you that as I look at this in the next few weeks and how we go through this process of finally determining who's going to be there, I know voters are angry. I know and share their anger. They're demanding government that taxes less, that spends less, and government that is in fact a government that can be more responsible to the people. I'm a solid Reagan conservative. I will campaign as one. I look forward to serving as one.
All right,
Thank you.
Mr. McCollum, thank you very much. Now, before we begin with the questions here in our format, I want to give you a chance to do something specific about something, an allegation or a charge that your opponent has made that you feel you have not been able to correct or respond to. Is there something specific that the other has said about you that you would like to correct right now? And I'll give you a minute to begin. Mr. Scott, you're first.
I think the thing that has disappointed me about my opponent is that, you know, he's not done anything to say why you should elect him. What he's done is he keeps continuing to try to say that there's something with regard to our success at Columbia that he questions. We built an unbelievable company, and a company that you know, we measured everything. We had great patient satisfaction, great outcomes, and all these things. And he just continues to want to attack, but not with the facts.
All right, Mr. Scott, thank you. Mr. McCollum?
Well, first of all, I think that some of these ads, and many of them that are being attacked attacking me time and again, Mr. Scott, have been ads that have been misleading. They haven't represented my views, specifically the Arizona immigration law. You know, I support that law, and I am involved right now in defending that in the courts against the charges that are made against it by President Obama. But what really bothers me is your response to what you just said about Columbia HCA. Your record is clear. There was fraud committed by Columbia HCA while you were CEO. It was fined $1.7 billion criminally. The company fired you while you were there and for this activity, and you went off with $300 million. And you're now campaigning, spending millions of dollars telling stories that are either not true about me or highly untrue about yourself. So I think this debate tonight is a serious one. We need to get down to the bottom of who's to be trusted, who has the experience, who can provide the leadership for our state.
John, can I respond to that?
Absolutely. Go ahead. Take some time.
So let's think about this. I started a company with my life savings, my wife's and my life savings, $125,000. We started with 2 hospitals. In over 9 years, we built a company to 343 hospitals, 135 surgery centers, and 285,000 employees. In that 9-year period of time, healthcare inflation dropped from 18% annualized to less than 1%. It's because we measured the living daylights out of everything. We were way better. When you looked at Gallup surveys on patient satisfaction, we were dramatically better than the competition. When you looked at measured outcomes, we won way more awards than anybody else because we measured. Now, what could we have done better? We could have hired more auditors, internal, external auditors. And that's what I should have done, and that's what I learned. Now, let's think about the difference.
10 seconds, Rick.
The difference is I take responsibility. Politicians never do. Look at the state we're in today, and our politicians have not taken any responsibility.
All right, now I promise we're going to be getting back to this, okay, both of you. I have a dozen questions on this one subject, and I know you'll want to get into all of them. But let me do something different here to give you a sense of what the people have been asking us to ask you about. What's the public really thinking about right now? And we asked them. So I want you to watch the screen. Here's what they said.
If you become governor, how, when, how soon will you have more jobs available?
How do you intend to create jobs for the area?
Jobs for people?
Absolutely jobs.
Creating jobs in the Tampa area and in Florida.
Somebody's got to turn the economy around to build up more jobs.
I have a 19-year-old grandson that is going to college here in town and cannot get a job.
All right, now you can see why jobs is so important. With unemployment over 11% here in Florida and over 1 million people looking for work, jobs could very well be the most vexing problem the state has. So let's deal with both. Where do you begin? You both have plans to bring new jobs and businesses to Florida. You say hundreds of thousands of jobs, but I noticed that really neither one of you has been very specific about how you're going to pay for it. So let's do this. Mr. McCollum, let's talk about your economic plan for development and how are you going to pay for it, and then we'll go over to Mr. Scott.
Well, John, the economic plan is not a plan that the government pays for. We need to create jobs in the private sector, and that's what my plan's about. And that's why we vetted it so much with Steve Forbes and talk about it. I'm a Reagan conservative Republican, and I know that it's in the private sector jobs are created. So the first thing we propose to do, to give the next governor the tools to lure businesses here, to be able to get headquarters and production facilities to come here and to grow jobs in the small businesses in Florida that are already here, is to reduce the corporate income tax from 5.5% to 4.5%, to give a 10-year exemption for companies in high-tech, biotech, and aerospace who choose to move here from the corporate income tax, to eliminate permanently the sales tax on certain high-tech and biotech and aerospace equipment that's needed to be able to give us the tools to track these industries, and to reduce a lot of the regulatory burden that currently is burdening our businesses in our state. And I also think we need to dramatically improve the public education system. We need litigation and lawsuit reform. It's a whole list of things that we need to do to give the next governor the chance to provide the opportunity for people to grow jobs here and to be able to lure businesses to come here to create those jobs.
All right, Mr. Scott, let's hear your plan.
This is the vote, and it's down to this. On August 24th, are you going to elect somebody that has never created a private sector job, or somebody that spent their entire career starting businesses from scratch, putting up their own money, and building great companies? So my plan is 7 steps, 700,000 jobs, 7 years. Hopefully many of you received our packet, our brochure this week. It is first accountability budgeting. We're going to look at every agency and figure out how we can make sure that they're providing a service that we want. We're going to find out the inefficiencies, get rid of them. We're going to reduce regulation. We're going to reduce the property income tax rate. We're going to cut the business tax. But if you look at what we're going to do, we're going to make this state over the next 4 years the one state where you say, if you're going to open up your company, you're going to pick Florida. It will be the #1 state because you have a governor that knows how to do it.
All right, in terms of managing money here and the state budget of $70 billion, Mr. Scott, you say you know how to balance the budget, yet you admit it was your lack of oversight that let your internal auditors and your former company rip off the government and taxpayers with the largest Medicare fraud case in the country. Now, what does your failure to manage your own company say about your ability to manage the budget of an entire state?
Well, you know, I've leveled with the voters from day one. You know, that company was a great company. We did a lot of great things. We could have done things better. When you're in business, you learn lessons. And the biggest lesson is trust but verify. When you have 285,000 employees, you have to trust people. We should have had more verification. So that's a lesson I learned, and that's a lesson I'll bring to the table. And so when you look at the state, that's exactly what I'll do. And the other thing, I will take responsibility if something goes wrong. If you look at the difference between that and politicians, they never take responsibility. Who's responsible for our unemployment rate, for our homeowners underwater on their mortgages, for our state budget increasing at the time we're in a recession? There's no politician taking any responsibility. They just continue to campaign on the same issue that they're going to fix.
May I respond to that,
Yes,
John?
sir.
You know, Rick, you say that you've taken responsibility for Columbia HCO. You know, you haven't. The truth of the matter is that all you've taken is $300 million. The reality is, Rick, that when we look back at what you did at Columbia, you ripped off the taxpayers. You ripped off the senior citizens. You were responsible as the CEO for the largest, most massive Medicare fraud in history, the most massive fraud on senior citizens, on veterans, on those who can least afford to do this. This is a company, HCA, that was very proud at the time you took over, sure, but the truth of the matter is that when you left, it went down the tubes. And you call that a success? It wasn't a success. And not only was it not a success, but to this day, there's reported in today's newspaper, in the Miami Herald, and in the St. Petersburg Times, an article that describes the fact that you're still involved in problems like this, in fraud. Solantic, a company that you started recently, according to the paper, there was a deposition you took just 6 days before you filed to run for governor that shows that it was committing fraud. Right. And I think that's a serious matter that you need to answer those charges on. Are you still continuing to commit fraud today, your companies?
Go ahead, Mr. Scott.
My opponent has no concern about the facts. First off, we have a website, factsforflorida.com. If you'll get on it, you can get updates right now. They'll tell you exactly what's going on. My opponent is a desperate career politician that will say anything to get elected. We built a great company. Solantic's a great company. He's bringing up some issue about some disgruntled employee. If you look at, you wouldn't, if you think that my opponent likes business, if you're in business, all he does is attack you.
Your time is going to be up, Rick. And we'll be getting back to this again. This is going to be an undercurrent of this whole discussion as HCA and your role there. But let me go back to you, Mr. McCollum. One of the criticisms that's been directed at you has been that you've been living off the taxpayers, so to speak, for years and bring nothing new to the table here, given the distrust that the voters are showing toward incumbents. My question is, what can you say that will convince us that by electing you governor of the state of Florida, that you will not be just more of the same?
Well, John, I'm proud of my record of public service. I have a record. Mr. Scott has no record of public service. He has no record except what he's telling you about in his slick TV ads and what he did at Columbia HCA and what we now learned is not such a proud record at Solantic and in some of his other businesses. But I have a long record, and I'm proud of that. When I was in Congress, I was elected with Ronald Reagan. I served there during the Reagan Revolution. I created and founded the House Task Force on Terrorism years before we had September the 11th. I was there at the time that we had the last balanced budget in the United States Congress, and I'm proud of that record, being there for the contract with America. I've been Attorney General of this state for the last 3.5 years. We've fought constantly against child predators, mortgage fraud, to protect the elderly against identity theft, many things that I'm really proud of that have gone on in my office. That's public service. And that's why the Naples Daily News today endorsed me for governor. This is Rick Scott's hometown newspaper, the hometown he's had for the last 7 years. And this paper said in that endorsement, Bill McCollum is not a career politician, he's a career public servant. There's a difference. I'm proud of my record. I'm proud to have been endorsed by Jeb Bush, Governor Bush. I've been endorsed by the Florida Chamber of Commerce. I've been endorsed by every leading Republican in the state, congressman and legislator.